Today we'll be looking at a way to think about creating chord progressions. I know when I was first starting writing, creating a chord progression caused me quite a bit of anxiety. I was learning all of these rules of functional harmony, and at the same time I was hearing people say, well, any chord can go to any chord. So how can both of those things be true at the same time? We're going to talk about how you can take the high-level concepts of functional harmony and apply them to so-called non-functional harmony to create chord progressions. Let's start by looking at the very basic ideas of functional harmony. If we take a C major scale and build a triad on each note of that scale, we get a 1 major chord, 2 minor chords, 3 minor chord, 4 major chord, 5 major chord, 6 minor chord, and 7 diminished chord. And each one of these chords has a particular function. Those functions are broken down into 3 groups, one being the tonic group, another being the subdominant group, and another being the dominant group. The tonic chords have a sense of home or resolution, and they contain the 2 chords C major, our 1 chord, and A minor, our 6 chord. And you'll notice there's only 1 note difference between those 2 chords. The 1 major is C, E, and G, and the 6 minor in first inversion is C, E, and A. Our subdominant chords are those chords where we start to move away from home. They contain the 4 chord, the F major chord, and the 2 minor chord, the D minor chord. And again, you'll notice that there's only 1 note difference between these 2 chords. F-A-C for the F major chord, and the D minor chord in first inversion, F-A-D. Next we have our dominant chords, and these are the chords that create a strong pull back to home. First we have our 5 chord, the G major chord. And this chord contains both the B natural, the leading tone that wants to move upward to C, and the root motion of G to C, a very strong 5th motion. We can further strengthen the dominant function of this chord by adding in the flat 7, making it a G7 chord. Now we have an unstable tritone that wants to resolve the F to the E and the B to the C. So we get this even stronger resolution. Our dominant chords also include the 7 diminished chord. And again, you can see this is very close to our G major chord. There's only 1 note difference. And this diminished chord also contains that tritone that wants to resolve to the E and C. You may have noticed that there's 1 chord that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's the 3 minor chord, the E minor chord. Let's look at how it's constructed. It's got the all-important 3rd of our C major scale, the E, and it's got the 5th, the G, and then the 7th, the B. Now that E and G both belong to our 1 chord, the C major chord. So is this a tonic chord? Well, if we look at it again, we also see the B natural, that all-important leading tone, and that belongs to our 5 chord, as does the 5th, the G. So it's got 2 notes that belong to the 5 chord and 2 notes that belong to the 1 chord. So what is its functionality? Is it a tonic chord or a dominant chord? Let's try it both ways and we'll see what works. First, I'll start by establishing the key of C major in our ears just by playing 1-5-1. And now I'm going to cadence from 5 to 3 minor as if it were a tonic functioning chord. To my ear, that works just fine. All right, now let's try using it as a dominant functioning chord, and I'm going to play 1-5-1 again just so we really have C major solidly in our ears. And now I'll play this 3 minor chord as if it has a dominant function and resolve it to the 1 chord. So yes, I think this chord could work as a dominant functioning chord or a tonic functioning chord, though in both cases it's a little bit weak. It's somewhat ambiguous, and that's why that 3 minor chord is less often used in many styles of music. So now we've just scratched the surface of what functional harmony is, but the main takeaway is that each chord has a function. And as we move through the different categories, tonic, subdominant, and dominant, we see a logic to that progression. We see the journey that happens. Let's take a very common chord progression that you hear in many, many songs and see how it works through the different categories. So I'm going to take the progression 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. You can hear that has quite a logic to it. It makes sense. Let's break down what's happening. We start the progression on the 1 chord, our C major chord, which is in the tonic region, so it's very stable. It feels like we're at home. Then we move to the A minor chord, which is our 6 minor chord, and that is also in the tonic region. So we're still on stable ground, we're still at home, we're just hearing a slightly different flavor. Now we start our journey away from home by moving to the D minor chord, our 2 minor chord. Now that's a subdominant chord, so it's as if we've left home and started a short walk, say around the block. Now we come to the 5 chord, or our G7 chord. And you can hear there's all sorts of tension in this chord. It's very unstable. That's because we have this tritone, and then we also have the leading tone here, the B, and we have this G, which is going to resolve downward to the C. So there's a lot of signposts pointing us back to home. And then finally, we move back to home, our 1 chord. Now that we've looked at how this progression works and how we can define it in this functional harmony system, can we take the main ideas that we're seeing here and apply them to so-called non-functional harmony? And I call it so-called non-functional harmony because do the other chords that we might use not have a function? Let's see. I'm going to start with C major. And then I'm going to go to the 5 chord, our dominant chord. And we'll notice that we have a G in common with the C chord, and we have our leading tone. So we have this 1 to 5 to 1. Can we get that same type of 1 to some sort of dominant sound and then back to 1, not using the chords in our chart here? Let's try that, a quote non-functional chord. So I'm going to start with the C major chord. And then I'm going to move to a chord that has a common tone and the leading tone. So I'm going to go to an E major chord, and we have the common tone of the E, and we have our leading tone of the B natural, and then back to C. So let's listen to that. To me, that has a bit of a dominant flavor, even though it's not one of our functional harmony chords. Let's look at some other examples. Let's take the same ideas that are behind our functional harmony progression of 1, 6, 2, 5, 1 and apply them to a non-functional progression. That being that we establish a home. In this case, we'll use a C major triad. That'll be our home chord. And then we'll move away from home on a journey. And then we'll return to home, and we'll still hear that C major triad as our home chord. Let's try some different possibilities. To me, all of those chord sequences that I just played are valid progressions. They have that sense of establishing a home, then taking a journey and moving away from home, and then finally returning back to home. The harmonic rhythm and the voice leading have a lot to do with that. But even when I played things that didn't have really strong voice leading, they still seem to work. If I were to play, it still is a useful progression to my ears. All right, let's look at some music that I've written using these ideas. I've written two short pieces, one called Hunger for Power and the other A Hero Returns Home. I've taken the high-level concepts of functional harmony and applied it to these non-functional chords. I started by writing a chord progression for each one of these and then writing the melody later on over the top of it. That's not usually the way that I work. Usually it's either the chords and the melody come at the same time or I write the melody first. But here I'm just focusing on creating a progression and then writing a melody. Now the melodies that I've written are using mostly chord tones from the chords that we created here. The first piece is all in minor chords, and the second piece is all using major chords. Now, you don't have to do it that way. You noticed in the examples that I was playing when we were improvising those chord changes, those were a mix of minor and major chords. You could use any flavor or quality of chord. I just used this as one extra little thing to add to it to show that you can write all minor chords, all major chords. They're non-functioning, yet they still have this sense of direction. We're telling a story. We're starting at the beginning, establishing the beginning of the story, our one chord, moving in a journey away from it, and then returning home and ending our story. I hope these ideas are helpful for you. Try this out. It really opens up some possibilities for chord progressions, and then you don't have to have so much anxiety about writing them. All right, let's listen to these two pieces, and I'll see you all next time.